this is New Time on Silk Way TV channel. We introduce you with the most visible news and important events that happened throughout this week in Kazakhstan and Central Asia. More details on politics, economy, social and cultural life with opinions from the most recognizable experts of Kazakhstan and world. I'm Dorian Sagulov, and this is what you'll see today. President of Kazakhstan paid an official visit to Jordan, new agreements on peaceful nuclear cooperation, and an exclusive interview with a member of the royal family. Are global conflicts nearing resolution? The US and Russia held their first talks in Riyadh, while Presidents Zelensky and Erdogan met in Ankara. Meanwhile, experts are questioning, will Gazans reach the second phase of ceasefire? A standout moment for Kazakh cinema, Kazakh makes its debut at the prestigious Berlinale. Watch the exclusive interview with the renowned Kazakh director Adilhan Yerzhanov. And let us start with the main political and diplomatic agenda. Kazakhstan and Jordan have agreed to expand cooperation in the nuclear sector. During President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's official visit to the kingdom this week, the two sides signed 15 agreements. The joint statement highlighted the importance of developing transport and logistics routes, including within the framework of the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route. More on the outcomes of the President Tokayev's visit to Jordan in the following report. Astana and Amman are resuming active diplomatic engagement. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev has arrived in Jordan for an official visit, the first visit by a Kazakh president to the country in 16 years. At the Al Husseiniya Palace, King Abdullah II and Crown Prince Al Hussein personally welcomed the head of state. For the distinguished guest, a guard of honor and a military orchestra were assembled on the palace square. Following the reports from the commander of the honor guard, the heads of state proceeded to the negotiation hall. President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev expressed his gratitude to the Jordanian leader for his contribution to strengthening the bonds of friendship and cooperation between the two countries.
I came with a goal to give additional impetus to our friendship, to our economic ties, and I believe that we share common attitudes and assessments with regard to what is happening in the world, but at the same time we are very much interested in having closer ties on the bilateral level. And we have some ideas, we have intention, and I believe that in the nearest future we will be able to reach some particular concrete agreements and to see some very good results. So we are ready to work hard as far as our cooperation is concerned, and generally, of course, we regard Jordan as a friendly, brotherly state.
King Abdullah in turn stated that the visit of the President of Kazakhstan opens up broad opportunities for further expansion of bilateral political, trade, economic and investment cooperation. The talks concluded with a joint statement by the heads of state, 5 memorandums and agreements, as well as 10 intergovernmental and commercial documents. For example, under one of the signed memorandums, Kazakhstan and Jordan will expand cooperation in the nuclear sector. Kazakhstan's national company Kazatomprom, together with the Jordan Uranium Mining Company, may begin uranium extraction and its export from Jordan. For Kazakhstan, the world's leading uranium producer, gaining access to a new market could be a significant step toward expanding its global presence.
According to this agreement, the both parties will explore the opportunities here in Jordan. The parties will embark on exploration works and studies on potential mining of uranium here in Jordan. Moreover, we have met with the Minister of Investments today and have discussed potential opportunities in the fields of gas here in Jordan and air transportation, fertilizers and many other things.
The two countries plan to cooperate not only in the mining sector but also in light and heavy industries, agriculture, investment attraction and, of course, trade. During the talks, it was noted that although 3,500 kilometers separate Astana and Amman, economic ties between them are actively developing.
The relation is not only on a mutual, we're also working together for the regional, where Kazakhstan can be a hub through the CIS countries for Jordan, and at the same time Jordan can be the hub for the Kazakhstani investment that are targeting the neighboring markets.
Over the past 20 years, Jordanian investors have invested nearly $16 million in Kazakhstan's economy. Today, 94 companies with Jordanian capital are registered in the country, with 59 of them actively operating. Cooperation is maintained at the state level. Both leaders also exchange views on international and regional security issues. President Tokayev expressed support for Jordan's position on the displacement of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, praising the kingdom's efforts in providing assistance to the enclave. Daurena Sagulov, Aynur Mangalin, New Time. Trade and economic relations between Kazakhstan and Jordan continue to show steady growth. Last year, bilateral trade reached $6 million, marking a 4.2% increase compared to 2023. The trade portfolio is diverse, ranging from knitwear, exotic fruits and mineral fertilizers to meat, honey and aircraft. Investment cooperation is also developing at a modest but stable pace. As previously mentioned, Jordan has invested nearly $16 million in Kazakhstan's economy over the past 2 decades. In contrast, Kazakh investments in Jordan remain significantly lower, amounting to around $4 million. The rapid development of the trade ties faces obstacles, including logistic challenges, a lack of major multinational companies in Jordan, and high transport costs that make Kazakh goods less competitive. During his official visit, President Tokayev also toured the Jordan Museum. He was introduced to rare artifacts and exhibits housed within the museum's walls and learned about the history of the largest museum in the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. A highlight of the visit was a unique exhibition featuring the Dead Sea Scrolls, which hold significant historical value. Among those who presented the museum's treasures to the president was Princess Sumaya bint al-Hassan of Jordan. In an exclusive interview with my colleague Aynur Mangali, the princess emphasized that Kazakhstan and Jordan share much more in common than it may seem at first glance. Let's take a listen to what she had to say.
So you've introduced the museum, one of the largest museums of Jordan, to the president of Kazakhstan. So what kind of prospects of cooperation and cultural exchange we can foresee in the future between our countries?
I think today more than ever we're talking about a world where we have to depend on human resilience, and through that I believe very, very strongly that there is a lot of synergy between our two countries in terms of the investment in our human resources, and this is what our museum tells the story of. It's a story of Jordan, its land and its people, and it tells a story of a people for 12,000 years who have had to innovate to survive. And that's very much the vision of our king, of His Majesty King Abdullah, in terms of our people being able to innovate and to continue to be innovators, to show the best strength and resilience in these challenging times.
What kind of feedback have you received from the president and the members of the delegation?
I think they seem to be very happy and very excited. I just think the visit maybe was a little bit too short, so I hope that means they will come back again.
More details and exclusive interviews from the official visit of the President Tokayev to the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan you can watch in the new episode of Reporter with President program this Sunday on Silkway. The recent meeting between Kazakhstan's president and the King of Jordan marks a pivotal moment in strengthening ties between the two nations. As cooperation between the countries continues to grow, it's opening up new possibilities on the global political stage. Since 2007, the two nations have worked closely through the Intergovernmental Kazakh-Jordanian Commission, and the Business Council has also been formed. But why are Kazakhstan and Jordan so crucial to each other? Our reporter Baljan Samigulina talked to Jordanian analysts for a deeper look.
Jordan is often called the Middle Eastern paradox, an exception to the norm. For many years, despite the challenges around it, the country has maintained stability and resilience. With the recent rise of new security threats like the conflict in Gaza, it's crucial to take a closer look at all the factors that are shaping the situation around Amman. Despite the military activity near its borders and the growing refugee crisis, experts agree that the collapse of Jordan or the fall of its current regime seems highly unlikely. At first glance, it's surprising that Jordan has remained so resilient, given its complex history and deep social divides. Over the years, it has weathered numerous crises, coup attempts, military failures, social unrest, and economic struggles. This resilience has also paved the way for stronger ties with distant neighbors like Kazakhstan. Analyst Amer Sabayle points out that it's vital for Jordan to have allies outside of its geographic neighborhood.
We witnessed always a Jordanian interest in Kazakhstan, and I think it's very important thing for Jordan to have a partner in Central Asia like Kazakhstan. I think many expertise are needed in Jordan when it comes to energy, trade, and at the same time, I think the geographic position of Jordan being in the Middle East, a gate to the Gulf as well, is always seen from a strategic perspective from Kazakhstan.
In recent years, the Hashemite monarchy has managed to maintain stability by securing foreign support to restore peace. Jordan is primarily an agriculture country with major phosphate reserves, while Kazakhstan, rich in energy resources, offers the foundation for their growing cooperation.
Especially that now the whole region is being prepared as well to think of regional cooperation, big regional economic projects, big talks now about energy, alternative energy or projects of energies, transportation, new hubs very close to the Gulf, Saudi Arabia. It will be very close as well to Syria.
Jordan's internal political situation remains stable largely due to the efforts of the royal family and consistent government policies. However, regular protests in support of Palestine, especially in major cities, continue. While most demonstrations are peaceful, growing frustration over the government's lack of a strong anti-Israel stance is raising concerns about potential social tensions. Kazakhstan and Jordan work closely in the UN and other international organizations, including peacekeeping missions and support for Palestinian refugees through the UN Relief and Works Agency. With up to 60% of Jordan's population of Palestinian descent, this demographic presence is a key factor in the country's challenges. Political analysts note that the Trump's Gaza plan was swiftly rejected by the Arab world, and Amman is now focused on creating a new stabilization plan that avoids the resettlement of Palestinians.
The idea of Donald Trump was not seen positively by people. This is all over the world, I think. But at the same time, we have to be realistic that we need to offer solution that can practically be done. So we cannot just say no. We need to offer solution, and I think this is what Jordan is trying to do together with Saudi Arabia, with Egypt, and definitely having countries like Kazakhstan supporting and backing up the Jordanian vision is important. So we are in the phase of building this alternative to Mr. Trump's plan.
Analysts suggest that we may soon see a potential solution that can be practically implemented. Otherwise, the war and the ongoing crisis in Kazakh could reach a point where no resolution is possible, leading to a prolonged humanitarian disaster. There is a growing concern that the situation may follow the trajectory outlined by the US president, and it's becoming increasingly difficult to ask people to remain in a place where basic elements of life are disappearing. At the same time, without a resolution, experts believe the resistance in Gaza could weaken over time, potentially leading many of its citizens to see living as their only viable option. Balzhan Samigulina, New Time.
And let's move on. In a major step toward resolution, Russia and the United States have made progress following recent talks in Saudi Arabia. Hours before the meeting, the US State Department clarified that the discussions would not focus on Ukraine, with the Kremlin emphasizing the restoration of Russian-American relations as the main topic. Meanwhile, there has been an announcement that Russian President Vladimir Putin and US President Donald Trump may meet later this month in Riyadh to engage in direct talks about Ukraine. At the same time, in Ankara, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan held bilateral talks with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to discuss efforts to resolve the ongoing Ukrainian conflict. These diplomatic developments have been met with positive reactions from political leaders in Kazakhstan.
At last, there is a glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel. The negotiation process is beginning. Kazakhstan has always maintained the position that the war must be stopped by any means necessary.
At the same time, in Paris, an emergency summit brought together leaders of various organizations and heads of 8 countries. The meeting was sparked by the Donald Trump administration's direct negotiations with Moscow, which took place without European involvement. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte shared a photo from the session showing an informal setting where strategic matters were discussed over a cup of tea. While no concrete decisions were made, all sides agreed on one key point: Ukraine needs reliable security guarantees. Following the summit, French President Emmanuel Macron revealed that he had spoken with both US President Donald Trump and the Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky, urging them to engage in open dialogue. Now there are just 2 weeks left until the end of the Gaza ceasefire deal's first phase, and yet several provisions of that agreement have to be fulfilled. The past week, Israel freed 369 Palestinians, while Hamas released 10. But what comes next is unclear, with big gaps between the two sides. When the parties are going to come for the second phase of the ceasefire? How many hostages are needed to be released until this time? Baljan Samigulina captured all the numbers that matter in the explainer section.
Gaza may be in ruins, and it is, according to UN estimates, littered with more than 50 million tons of rubble after 15 months of war. But that doesn't mean it's no longer a homeland. This was the emotional scenes in Ramallah, the occupied West Bank in Gaza, as Palestinian prisoners were reunited with their loved ones. Many had been detained since the conflict first began 15 months ago, a taste of freedom, something many feared they would never experience again.
It feels like coming back from the dead, like being reborn, but emerging from a grave called prison. I was sentenced to life imprisonment and had already served over 21 years. If I had completed 3 more months, it would have made 22 years in captivity.
These Palestinian prisoners had been serving life sentences in Israeli jails. Their release would probably not have been possible without a prisoner-captive swap. On Saturday, within the Gaza ceasefire exchange, 369 Palestinians and 4 Israelis returned home. Israel said they would begin indirect negotiations with Hamas on the second phase of the Gaza ceasefire deal this week, but demanded a complete demilitarization of the enclave.
Israel is committed to our goal to ensure the release of all our hostages. We also committed to all the objectives of the war as were decided by the Security Cabinet. We demand complete demilitarization of Gaza. We will not accept the continued presence of Hamas or any other terrorist groups in Gaza.
Just days ago, there were doubts that this exchange would ever happen, with Donald Trump's proposal on Gaza to relocate Palestinians and 2 parties threatening to break it. However, there was another release of hostages this week of the Bibas family. Hamas said they were killed in the Israeli bombardment, an accusation Israel has not confirmed. Shiri's husband, Yarden, was released by Hamas in February. The handover included the bodies of Shiri, her 2 children, Ariel and Kefir, ordered Lifshitz, an Israeli group having confirmed their death.
We're bringing home 4 of our beloved hostages, fallen heroes. We embrace the families, and the heart of an entire nation is torn. My heart is broken.
Hamas is also to release 6 living hostages on Saturday. Hamas has said it's willing to hand over all remaining hostages in a single exchange if a permanent truce is agreed. This stage, which has yet to be negotiated, should see the launch of a plan to rebuild Gaza. It's a massive task which the UN estimates will take at least $53 billion.
As you can see, we are living amongst the destruction. When people went back to their areas, they didn't find houses or areas. Those who found a house found an area to clean, stay in, and shelter themselves in. It's better than a tent.
While a ceasefire was in place and tanks were no longer on the move, humanitarian aid had been struggling to reach Gaza. Despite 6 rounds of prisoner releases, major shortages of vital aid persisted. There had been a growing concern that Israel was more interested in freeing captives than upholding the terms of the ceasefire. Under the agreement, 600 trucks of aid should have entered Gaza daily, but reports say only 30% 90% of that aid arrived. Much of it was stuck in Egypt with bulldozers and mobile homes waiting at the Rafah crossing. According to the peace plan, by March the 1st, 60,000 homes and 200,000 tents should be delivered, but so far only 10% of the supplies have entered Gaza. The UN says over 1.8 million people need emergency shelter, as 69% of homes are destroyed. Thousands are living among the rubble, with an estimated 10,000 bodies trapped underneath.
457 trucks loaded with more than 7,200 tons of various types of aid, including dry and canned food, blankets, mattresses, baby milk, medicines, and medical supplies. It was all prepared with care. Hopefully, it will reach our brothers in Gaza as soon as possible.
Despite the relief of these reunions, the past week has highlighted just how fragile this ceasefire is. No one in Gaza takes it for granted. Hostage for prisoner swamps should continue in the coming weeks according to the ceasefire agreement. During the 6-week period, Hamas is expected to release 33 hostages gradually, while Israel frees around 1,900 Palestinian prisoners. All signs that stage 1 of this fragile truce is still holding as mediators amp up efforts to solidify a permanent ceasefire. With less than 2 weeks left in the current ceasefire and efforts underway to implement phase 2, the focus of ensuring that freedom is permanent for all Gazans become even more critical. Marjan Samigolina, New Time.
As global headlines remain fixated on Donald Trump's latest statements and US foreign policy moves, critical questions emerge. How serious is Washington about taking control of Gaza? In an exclusive interview with our colleagues from Kazakh news agency, Dr. Wang Huiyao, founder and the president of the Center for China and Globalization, shares his perspective on China's growing influence in the region. He explains how China's engagement could shape the future of the Middle East and suggests that Trump is indeed likely to pursue control of the Gaza Strip.
Well, I think what President Trump said is probably real. And the thing is that, we need a balance of the world. I mean, China is the largest trading partner with Gulf countries and with many Middle East countries. And of course also have a huge economic influence there. So I don't think it's a good idea to relocate 2 million Palestinians from Gaza to other countries, which could add chaotics. But China, as one of the P5 member countries of UN, and China, EU, and many other countries can really be a balanced view of what US has been proposing. I think EU against relocate Gaza, Palestinians. China, of course, is against that. Let's stick to the 2 Palestinian state solution that all countries has agreed in the past, and let's really do that. So China is an important balance of this unilateral approach by the United States. I think China is also a great friend of Gulf countries, Middle East countries. With all 14 fractions of Palestinians, we could really provide some constructive ideas. China could also reconstruct Gaza with its huge infrastructure, building capacities, and even Ukraine. So I think Chinese involvement for a peaceful Middle East transition to stick to the 2 Palestinian state solution, together with the EU and many other countries, BRICS countries, would be so important, so that we shouldn't have just one country unilateralism to dominate the future plan of Gaza and the Palestinians.
Watch the full interview on US-China tensions and global trade on the Kazakh news agency YouTube channel. And let's move on. That is not acceptable. These were the exact words used by European politicians in response to US Vice President J.D. Vance's address at the Munich Security Conference. On the opening day of the conference, Vance's speech, in which he sharply criticized the domestic policies of European allies, sent shockwaves through the establishment. For the first time in years, Munich witnessed an exchange not of compliments between Europe and America, but of reproaches. In an unusually harsh tone, Vance criticized European leaders over what he described as restrictions on democracy, freedom of speech, and their approach to migration policies. What exactly did Vance mean, and how did European leaders respond? Found out in our next report. On Valentine's Day, a spark ignited between the United States and Europe, but it was anything but tender feelings. On February 14, participants of the Munich conference expected a speech from the US Vice President addressing increased NATO contributions from European countries and negotiations regarding the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Instead, J.D. Vance launched a heavy criticism of European nations, accusing them of betraying democratic values.
The threat that I worry the most about vis-a-vis Europe is not Russia, it's not China, it's not any other external actor. And what I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America.
In short, Vance accused European leaders of sidelining the rising far-right forces across the continent. He pointed to the annulment of election results in Romania over alleged foreign interference. Ahead of the conference, Vance had also criticized the German government for its so-called firewall strategy, under which mainstream parties refused to engage with the far-right Alternative for Germany party.
And I really do believe that allowing our citizens to speak their mind will make them stronger still, which of course brings us back to Munich, where the organizers of this very conference have banned lawmakers representing populist parties on both the left and the right from participating in these conversations.
Vance's call for cooperation with all political parties, including the far-right one, came as a shock to Germany. The AfD, partly classified as a right-wing extremist, has also advocated for lifting sanctions against Russia. In response, Chancellor Olaf Scholz firmly stated that Germany would not allow foreign interference in its democracy. Reiterating the country's long-standing stance of distancing itself from far-right groups, a position shaped by Germany's Nazi past, Scholz emphasized that mainstream German parties would continue to refuse any cooperation with the AfD.
That's why we will not accept it if outsiders intervene in our democracy, in our elections, and in the democratic formation of opinion in favor of this party. That's just not done, certainly not amongst friends and allies. We resolutely reject this.
German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius also reacted with irritation to the US Vice President's remarks. According to the Financial Times, Pistorius described the comments as unacceptable while still seated in the audience, and repeated the same words on stage about an hour later.
Spricht von annihilation of democracy.
He spoke of the annihilation of democracy, and if I understood him correctly, he compared conditions in parts of Europe with those in authoritarian regimes. Ladies and gentlemen, that is not acceptable.
Vance's rhetoric managed to unite even Olaf Scholz's opponents. German conservative opposition leaders joined the Chancellor's domestic rivals in condemning the US Vice President's criticism of Europe's stance on hate speech and the far right.
We respect the presidential elections and the congressional elections in the US, and we expect the US to do the same here. Free speech remains free speech and remains part of our open democratic society. But fake news, hate speech and offenses remain subject to legal restraints and control by independent courts.
Political analysts note that the speech was significant for the speaker himself, helping him craft an image as an independent political figure in the United States, where vice presidents traditionally play a secondary role. However, it proved far more important for the audience, deepening concerns about the future of the US-Europe alliance. Some experts now see tectonic shifts in the global order following the Munich Security Conference.
The Munich Security Conference clearly showed that we are witnessing tectonic shifts of the order structures and also of the positioning of major powers. The United States really is the big question mark at the moment. If we put together what has been said about the US international role since Donald Trump came into the White House not very long ago, we see that the United States wants to retreat from international organizations, so it is weakening structures of international order.
Vance's speech is now seen as a defining moment in the history of US-Europe relations. Experts view it as a declaration of an ideological war and the beginning of a cultural confrontation between the United States under Trump's leadership and its European allies.
He showed a deep ideological rift to Europe. He said that democracy was under threat in Europe and tried, in my view, to redefine the principles of democracy, but in a way that is definitely not the European values consensus. So what we saw was a demonstration of a representative of a US government which is right-wing populist and itself undermining democracy at home and trying to convey that this is happening in Europe as well.
At the closing of the Munich conference, Chairman Christoph Heusgen could not hide his disappointment over the outcome of US-Europe discussions and broke down in tears, calling Vance's speech a nightmare for Europe.
This conference started as a transatlantic conference. After the speech of Vice President Vance on Friday, we have to fear that our common value base is not that common anymore. I'm very grateful to all those European politicians that spoke out and reaffirmed the values and principles that they are defending. Let me conclude, and this becomes difficult.
Daurian Isagulov, New Time. Germany will hold snap elections for the Bundestag on 23rd February, following the collapse of the ruling three-party coalition last autumn. A new cabinet will be formed once the newly elected parliament selects the chancellor. All signs point to Friedrich Merz, leader of the Christian Democrats, as the likely next chancellor. According to German TV broadcaster ZDF, Merz is leading the race with 29% support. However, forming a government could prove challenging. The far-right Alternative for Germany party is expected to play a key role in shaping the political landscape, with around 20% of voters reportedly ready to back them, securing the party seats in the Bundestag.
Their current success is based on two factors. It's the salience of the migration issue. We had some murders just recently, murders by migrants, so this basically confirmed their anti-migration narrative in a way. But also the frustration with the political elites has been risen over the past years because of inflation mainly, and also because of the internal dynamics of the current coalition. They were fighting a lot, and this confirmed a lot of the anti-elitist narrative of the far right. So I would say it's both. It's the migration, it's the salience of the migration issue and the frustration with the other parties.
The anti-Islam and anti-immigration Alternative for Germany party has called for closing borders and denying asylum seekers the right to family reunification. Some senior members have sparked controversy by discussing the possible deportation of millions of people of foreign origin, including German citizens. Currently, the AfD stand second in opinion polls, behind only the main conservative opposition. The party's growing support could hinder the formation of a majority government by either center-right or center-left parties. As previously stated, Germany's leading political forces have vowed not to cooperate with the AfD at the national level. And let us end with good news for Kazakh cinema. The film Kazakh made its debut at the prestigious Berlinale. Directed by Adilhan Yerjanov and produced by Tiger Films, the European premiere of this post-horror thriller took place on February 18 as part of the 75th Berlin International Film Festival. Kazakh was one of only 30 films selected for the festival's forum program, and it stood out as the only film from Kazakhstan to be featured at this major event of this year. The film tells the gripping story of a mother whose son undergoes a dramatic transformation after enrolling in a military school. It had its Asian premiere at the 37th Tokyo International Film Festival, where it earned glowing review from critics and audience alike. Director Adilhan Yerjanov personally introduced the movie to festival audience in Berlin. New Time reporter caught up with the director backstage at the festival for an exclusive conversation.
Adilhan, it's a pleasure to have you with us from Berlin. We understand you presented your film Cadet at the 75th Berlin International Film Festival. Could you please share your emotions and impressions from the event, especially since, as we know, your film was the only one from Kazakhstan represented this year at the festival?
Hello, it's a pleasure to be here. Yes, the European premiere took place 2 days ago. From my experience, I believe audiences are pretty much the same everywhere, but strangely enough, it also depends on the time and place. The emotions of the audience in the morning can differ from those in the evening, but this screening was success because the audience was truly engaged and felt what was happening on the screen. I could sense that in the theater.
How did you know that the screening was successful? Have you received any feedback from other high-profile filmmakers?
Feedback is still coming in, mainly through social media posts, reviews and critics' reactions. Different opinions are gradually emerging, and we're still observing them. This process is ongoing.
Let's talk a bit about the story of Cadet. How did you come up with the idea for the screenplay? And why did you choose the post-horror genre, which is quite unusual for the Kazakh film industry?
I believe fear is the most cinematic emotion. If I had to choose between genres like melodrama, comedy or horror, I would definitely prefer horror because it provides a lot of opportunities to explore cinematic qualities. You can play with light, shadow and suspense. The horror genre gives the director a full range of tools to work with, much more than in comedy or melodrama. So when I wanted to work within a genre, I always considered westerns and horror films, as both allow me to tell something personal.
What do you think are the strongest aspects of your filmmaking styles that you brought to Cadet, which have helped you showcase it at multiple film festivals? What sets it apart?
I think both festival audiences and general viewers are craving genre films. The element of genre is always interesting, whether for highbrow critics or a wider audience. For me, this kind of art house mainstream is where I'm headed, and I think that's something critics and audience can both find interesting.
Your film has been praised by Oscar-winning director Alfonso Cuarón, who called Cadet an impressive horror. What are your distribution plans for the film?
The film had a wide release in Kazakhstan just a couple of days after its world premiere in Tokyo, back in early November. It's already being picked up by global distributors, and talks are underway. I think there will be more screenings at various venues throughout the year in different regions.
What are your overall goals within the film industry? Will you continue making horror films, and if so, what themes will they explore?
I'm not necessarily planning to make another pure horror film, but the element of fear and suspense will always be present in my work. I'm not sure if it will be pure genre piece or a combination of genres, but suspense will definitely play a part in my future films.
Adilhan, we're very proud of you, and before we let you go, what advice would you give to aspiring filmmakers who want to show their films at international festivals? And what guidance would you give yourself for the next few years, considering industry trends?
I think the most important piece of advice I would give, especially if I could turn back time, is to keep filming no matter what. Don't be discouraged by criticism or negative reviews. You have to keep shooting, working, growing and improving. That's the best advice I can give.
Thank you very much, Adilhan, for joining us from Berlin. We wish you continued creative success.
Thank you very much. And that's it for today. All the main news about Kazakhstan and Central Asia you can find here. More special projects about our country you can also watch on Silkway TV channel. So stay tuned and see you next week.